Hi all, welcome to Free Float. I am Sham and I have Kishan with me.
Hi, Sham.
Today's topic is buy and hold, and why that is a very bad way to go about making investment decisions. Um, so this is something that catches investors' fancy every time they seem to make a bit of money, right? So at the beginning, of a bull market, when some of your 5-year-old investments that have been underwater suddenly, enter the greenish territory, you'll be like, yay! This buy and hold rocks. If I just sold it 5 years ago, I would have booked a loss, but now, I'm back in the green. So I'm clearly a, very smart investor. I invested in companies with a big, wide moat, and clearly it's the best thing. So I'm going to buy and hold forever and ever those companies. The problem with that is uh, a lot of companies don't make it, um, including the big ones, right? I put examples of US companies because they're the most easily accessible. But there are plenty of companies, listed in India that have been terrible investments, and some of them have just vanished without a trace. Probably merged out of existence, or caught up in some fraud, or some of the or just couldn't make it. Um, so Kishan, are there any glaring Indian examples you want to give before we dive into the US?
Yeah, I think I won't. I don't want to talk about ITC, so that we'll ignore. But I mean, over the last probably 20, 30 years, you had companies in India like say I mean ADAG Group is a good example. So is something like Vodafone Idea.
Right.
Or I mean, these are bad examples because these are badly corporate. I mean, corporate governance and stuff is pretty bad. But then if you think about it even more broadly, maybe you have some maybe Tata group companies, which were perhaps the leaders 10, 15 years ago. Today they are at best mid cap companies. There are a lot of companies within in that range. If you take, uh, in India, even if you take a company like Asian Paints, which I think has the strongest moat, strongest competitive advantage that they can be in a market which is extremely, there are probably two or three players really in the market, and Asian Paints has as by far bigger market share and has considerable, moats around it, which seem, which seem extremely entrenched. But then it's not about I don't think it's that I mean I can see Asian Paints being around much longer for the next 30 to 50 years, but at today's valuation most of the growth I would say is priced in. So the upside, if you're taking it from a much more longer time horizon, there might not be a lot of upside there. So I don't think it's just about companies that today are leaders and tomorrow they'll be they won't be there, or there'll be a much smaller size. You could have a company that has a large market presence today, and is expected to, in most probability, will have a large presence even in 2 decades from now. But the appreciation in stock price might not be what you expect.
Right. I mean, that's clearly, valuation driven. But if you look at some of the examples in the post, right? GE, IBM, Kodak. So these are all like, big victims, not only of creative destruction. Like you can say that, yeah, Kodak is a poster child of creative destruction.
Right.
That they basically invented the digital camera before everybody else, but they did not want to ruin their chemicals business, which was like basically reels, film camera reels, and developing them and so on. So they didn't want to ruin that business, so they just sat on it while competition caught up and completely sort of drove them to bankruptcy. So, but that's like the poster child of creative destruction. But there are many companies, like for example, GE, right? It was a huge conglomerate, making everything from your light bulb to jet engines, right? So a huge conglomerate, big footprints in most markets. Books were written about it, about how great their CEO was, 20 years ago, and now, they're caught up in a whole bunch of downgrades and accounting.
Upgrade.
Uh,
I think also for GE, the I mean, the thing is that it was such a big conglomerate, and it made such terrible capital, allocation decisions. So it's not traditionally what you would call a company with moat. I mean, it's got a moat in say the airline industry, where its engines are uh, again, it's very two-player or three-player market, but it's got so many other uh, small industries where uh, its advantage, or its capital allocation decisions were so poor that the share price would not obviously you would end up losing money, and and your cash flows would be would turn negative, or would be much more less than what you would expect it to be. So I think those are things where as a conglomerate you have a discount, you know and G is a good example of why you should have a big discount, for conglomerates, because they end up making bad capital allocation
yeah.
decisions. But I think more larger, I think my first example of the concept of moats was obviously from from Warren Buffett and stuff. And the two examples that stick out are Coca-Cola and American Express. And the way it's described of most of these two companies, well, American Express, the traveler's check and stuff like that. Why no one would take anything except like the American traveler's check. Uh, and then you have Coca-Cola, where every restaurant, every supermarket in the world at one point would want to have Coca-Cola in the shelves. If you take both the examples, Travis checks is gone. It's gone even before I grew up, and and Coca-Cola, you have reached a point where restaurants and supermarkets of a particular type are happy not to have Coke on the shelves. So so I would say that for me it's been a good. Those are, I think, two good examples that what are leaders. There's always something that's going higher and above. I remember telling people that in our lifetime, for example, right, when I grew up, there were I've used probably 7 or 8 like messengers, like from ICQ to MSN to Yahoo, and today, and BlackBerry, and then today WhatsApp is probably the most dominant messenger out there. But I don't know if 10 years from now, you know, whether I'll be using WhatsApp or not. Because it's. I can't imagine not using WhatsApp today. But 10 years from now, who knows? So all these modes that we see today that are beatable, from Facebook to say I don't know, Google also, maybe 10, 20 years from now, this will be you'll find something new that's come 10 years from. So I think the world is always changing, and it's very hard to imagine um what will happen tomorrow. But that's why when people talk to me about modes, I like to tell them about, say, I remember this very good line from this movie Barbarians at the Gate, where they're talking about Oreos, and it's like and I forgot what the exact line was, but the line was that children who are not born yet are still are already craving for it.
Right. So see, the second problem with this buy and hold forever concept is that you're very much hitching your wagon on the corporate culture, and the corporate managers' ability to sort of look through these sort of blind corners and figuring out how to manage that lead as well. So you mentioned capital allocation decisions. Yeah, so GE for a while was excellent at that. So the GE Capital was a cash cow, and they did win quite a few analysts appreciation for actually setting up that unit as as something that was done with tremendous foresight and so on and so forth, right up till the point where they blew up. So it's very difficult to sort of know whether the management is doing a good job of capital allocation. Forget about projecting it into the future. You don't even know whether they're doing a good job right now.
Right. Also, I think this comes back. Say if you're a company that makes a particular item. Like say if you're involved in some industrial product and stuff. If you just focus on that particular industry product and say you're the best in the world, and you're very focused on what you're doing, the chances are that your moat in that industry might sustain, and you end up having maybe good margin, and you might have a high return on equity. But the moment you're saying, okay, this is boring, and I go into some other business which is maybe related, maybe you're maybe you're either forward or like backward integration, or you're going into something extremely new. I think that's the time businesses lose their focus. I think from what you wanted to start to because good businesses always end up focusing on that one thing that they or the few things that they do well. The moment they look at something, especially small to medium enterprises, I think it becomes a distraction to to the company. I mean, to the management, and the stock then starts reflecting that that lack of focus. I think it's very hard.
Yeah, it is extremely hard. I agree with that, and it's extremely hard for investors to sort of figure out beforehand, right, whether this management is going to kind of lead the company in the right direction or not. And you mentioned Coca-Cola, right? So the fight between Coca-Cola and Pepsi is legendary, right? So Pepsi grew from nothing to almost half the market share. So you have a Coke and Pepsi duopoly. But have you heard of Dixie Cola?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so there are a whole bunch of cola knockoffs in the US. Dixie Cola is one of the most famous one. But there are quite a few of them. Most of them are store brands. So Walmart has its own cola brand.
Cola brand. Okay.
Yeah. So if you don't care, if all you want is dark flavored sugar water, there are plenty of brands out there. But still, because of the marketing and the the advertising and the logistics involved in this, the brand recall kind of always goes to Coke and Pepsi, right? And on top of that, like both of these companies have like diversified into other drinks. I think in one of our previous posts, I mentioned that in the US they have this thing right down to the pack, right? So an average person drinks 8 liters of water a day. So how do you divide that 8 liters? Some of it will be milk, some of it will be water, some of it will be yeah, juice and so on. So the fight is for that 8 liters. This this has been going on for a while now, and Coke has and Pepsi both have diversified into fruit juices, into organic stuff, orange juice, and and water, especially the bottled water. Such a big scam, but it's one of the biggest money spinners. So even though their uh, initial moat was under threat, the
Yeah.
people were moving away from sugar water into healthier choices. They moved quickly. They
And the
moved quickly.
transition, yeah, I think, see, the thing about diversification is that for Pepsi, it's still focused on its core, business, which is like beverages, right? So it does, if it launches a new brand, it still benefits from its vast distribution network, its knowledge of sourcing, raw material to having production set up, and stuff. So those are things. But I'm talking about, like, say, a poultry business getting into financial services,
Right. Right, right.
like, so something completely different, and that you see a lot. Like, I mean, for example, you can see this in, like, ADAG itself. Like, the lack of focus in the group, because suddenly you have capital requirements, not just in one business but in many businesses, and not one business is a cash cow. You know,
Right.
it's not like Reliance Industries using a cash cow of a stable cash flow of one business to fund another business, because and now it seems like it is very prescient, because 10 years from now there might not be much of an oil and gas industry. So I think it really comes down to modes being how how enduring modes are, and two, whether a company can use that mode to transition itself to to maybe to something new. And those are very difficult choices, I think.
Yeah, so like you mentioned Pepsi, right? So they have this Lay's chips. So the story behind that was Pepsi thought it was a great idea because they already had a distribution network, people stocking sodas. So convincing them to also stock chips with such a high margin was, they thought it was an easy sell. So when they started shipping those chips, right, pretty much every retailer started sending them back. And what they realized was that they were trying to ship chips through their existing bottled water, logistics channel, whereas those bottled drinks are hardy, right? So you can throw them around. It doesn't require much handling, whereas chips are fragile. So
Yes.
when you ship them through the same channel, so even though
Well,
you're
they'll
shipping chips, they were all broken
they'll
inside. So
break.
they had to set up a parallel network to ship chips. So it's very tricky because unless you truly understand the business, right, from A to Z, it's
See,
very difficult to, even as a manager, right? So I'm
to
sure
see to
Pepsi
first.
guys are managers are way smarter than most investment managers out there. But even they
They
couldn't.
couldn't. Yeah, I mean, no one would have thought about that. Like, when you're thinking about, like, shipping goods, the last thing you remember, oh my God, the handling of this is, we have to,
Yeah.
take care of that. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Also, I think that if you had to think about modes, like, I mean, in India, what's happened right now, I think all businesses with modes are extremely highly valued. You know, makes it even more harder for someone to invest, because you might not have a steep correction. Like, they might not all fall 50%, but at some point you'll have probably a decade of underperformance. You know,
Right.
right? So I think it's, as an investment strategy, it always makes sense to see moats as a thing that that you that's not what every, like any price you pay for.
Right. So, there is definitely a valuation angle to these high mode quality companies. And also most of these, managers with these modes, end up making poor choices if, if you're not carefully tracking them. And it mostly boils down to your ability to analyze the business as an owner, and is it really worth your time and the effort, and are the returns commensurate with the effort you put in, right? So there are many stories where people have invested in State Bank of India thinking it's going to be there forever, so it's a very safe investment, but they have had zero returns.
Yeah, in the last 10 years, maybe.
Yeah.
But
No, more
that's
than.
but that's another capital allocation. I think the people most miss the most in finances uh, is the return on equity.
Yeah.
And as long as the return on or the free cash flows rather, so as long as the free cash flows are high and a high percentage of your it's high and it's growing, if that happens, the stock would go up. But if your capital if your return on equity is in single digits, or in the low teens, and the stock is not going to go places, because at the end of the day, it shows that there's no moat either.
Right. And not only that, like take a symphony, for example, right? So this is a very recent example. 2014, everybody was gaga over Symphony. Like those water coolers, they're awesome. They're expanding all over the world. They went and bought some Mexican plant saying we will ship water cooler to Alaska, right? So everybody was, wow, Symphony, man, that's awesome. And look at the share performance since then. So first of all, people clearly overpaid for water, for a water cooler company. Second of all, there was no moat, because any Tom, Dick, and Harry can order a bunch of knockoffs from China, slap their brand on it and sell it on Amazon. So where is the moat in water coolers? Nobody cares about Symphony water coolers if your competitor is 50% cheaper than you, right?
Right. Exactly. And I think that these things about moats is, I mean, first of all, I think when it comes down to moats, you should see the pricing power. Like like Apple has pricing power. It comes down to whether how good your margins are, and margins translate directly into return on equity. So I think if Symphony cannot have the pricing power that it wants, then it doesn't have a moat. The moat comes down from if I want to go buy a chocolate, and if the chocolate is not there in the store, will I not buy anything else, and will I go fighting for that particular chocolate somewhere else? I think that's a good advantage of moat. And if Symphony has a moat, it can have probably much higher prices, and still people will go to it because they think it will last for a while. I think that is something that people miss out, that the concept of moats or competitive advantage is not about it comes down to a lot about how people perceive it, and how much people are willing to pay for that premium.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like Google is a good example of that, of the moat. No matter what you do, people are too attached to using Google, right? So
Yeah. Well, that's a Google is a completely different story, which we can discuss at some point. But the problem with modes is we just don't know what it is, and how to measure it in real time. Because once you have this margin and free cash flow, you're going to attract a ton of competitors who are going to imitate you, who are going to try and muscle into your territory. So you need to also be able to defend that moat, right? So you need your artillery, your IP, your lawyers, and all those guys involved who will protect your moat.
Yeah.
So just because you have it doesn't mean you sit on it. And there's like so much competitive dynamics involved in the study of moats that I don't think most investors are capable of of doing that. And
I also think
and the few cases where they have done it, those case studies are so widely known like you mentioned, in India, the list of quality companies are a handful, and pretty much everybody knows it, right? So like you have your Asian Paints, you have your Pidilite, and you have your Page Industries. So there's just a handful of those guys, and people have just bought it en masse,
Right.
thinking that it'll go on
Good
forever.
example. So you think Burger King is a good example of that?
I had a client who asked me, should she subscribe to the Burger King IPO? And I told her I don't recommend IPOs because it's a low
It's a
float.
waste of time.
Yeah, it's a waste of time. It's a low float game,
Yeah.
and I know, and even the pop can be explained because of lack of float. So
Yes.
you wait for a year, when
And
things
the IPO, yeah, and
things
IPO is
die
good.
down and it'll be cheaper. And the worst case thing is, look, nobody makes money, man, in this in food retailing,
No, but
right?
so for me, when it comes down to moat, right? So the reason why I think Jubilant and Burger King has these, the market perceive them to be better uh, is because they have the ability to to go from one to say 260 stores, or or in the case of Jubilant, over 12 stores in a very short time, if in a short time frame, literally. And they have the management bandwidth to to manage those 1,200 outlets in a proper systematic, system driven, process driven, you know uh, quality control and stuff, which an Indian competitor, I mean, there's not been one Indian chain that's been able to replicate that across the country, and so that's a moat that these businesses enjoy, because I mean everything is more process and system driven in a country where there's a lot of good opportunities that's available, and these
Look,
guys,
you brought up the example of Jubilant Foods, right? So pizza, okay. So I agree that for most Indians, the first taste of pizza was Domino's, okay, hands down. And there are other chains like Papa John that tried to sort of enter into that space, but they couldn't. So you can argue that yes, Jubilant Food has a moat, but you're comparing Jubilant Food as a chain with Papa John's as a chain. So you got like these two elephants fighting.
yeah,
But my problem with that analysis is that once you have the taste of pizza, is Domino's the best pizza you can eat in your locality? And
yeah.
that's,
So I
yeah.
think so I think
So,
so I think
So Domino's does the bulk of the heavy lifting in introducing pizza to you.
right.
But when time comes for you to reorder, you will go and reorder from Zomato, who is showing you some cool
Unless
local pizza guy who's going to
right.
like so there's this company called 2X Mojo 2X Toppings or something. Their pizza beats Domino's
No.
hands down. I always order from that. So
But then here's the thing: Domino's never says that the pizza is the best. They always say that a pizza, wherever you are, we will deliver it to you. Rain, hail, a storm. You could be in middle of nowhere. If there's a Domino's nearby, we'll deliver it. In 30 minutes, and that's their pitch. I mean, it's not the pizza is just incidental. You know,
yeah.
it's there because it's like it's the most easiest thing to make and sell. I mean, but that's a moat. I mean, in the sense that I could have 1,200 outlets spread over a country, and people, that's a moat, and that's a very hard moat to beat, because there's not been a single dosa chain. I mean, dosa can be a nationwide thing, but no dosa chain has come up, like that. So I think that's a big moat. I mean, Indians have tried. I mean, I tried doing, but I've so far found it very hard. I mean, to
Yeah,
replicate that model. So again, that's a moat, you know.
that is
The,
true. That
but
is
the
true.
moat is already overpriced.
Yeah, I agree that it's overpriced. I just find it hard to believe that, a food retail chain can command that kind of a premium. I've always shaken my head in disbelief, looking at the evaluation. But the market, true, is
Man, I mean,
gives it.
Jubilant, when it listed 10 years ago, it was worth more than the parent. And even now, I mean that from 10 years, that stock has gone, from has gone up from 5 times since then. So I mean, I mean, uh, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, who are we to argue with the
Yeah.
collective wisdom of the markets, right? So it is what it is. So with that, I think we've taken up 30 minutes of our viewers' time. So it's a good place to sign off. So we'll catch you again next week for more discussions around moats and investing and whatnot. Stay tuned. Bye.
Bye.